Hey, welcome back, Knicks fans. Just wanted to do a quick video to kind of wrap up the season. The New York Knicks, they played the Toronto Raptors tonight to wrap up the season. And we saw some special things by Emmanuel Quickly and Obi Toppin. I know some people feel like these are not really important games. I do agree they're not important games. However, you can't deny actually the Toronto Raptors, they were without like two of their most important players. But we're also missing some key players too. And so the Toronto Raptors are a pretty good team. The team that they trotted out there tonight was pretty good. They played good defense. And you have to like what you saw from Emmanuel quickly and also from Obi Top in this game, especially from IQ because with IQ, my concern is how ball dominant he is. And I was curious to see how he was going to perform tonight against the Toronto Raptors. He still put on a show, and it was very encouraging to see it. People think it's not a very important game. I really disagree with that because I agree it's not important. However, there's a lot of good things you can get from this game. It wasn't like an easy 31 or 32 points, whatever it is, quickly got, and it wasn't an easy 40 points uh, by Obi Toppin. So I was impressed with their performance, especially with IQ. I really wanted to see how he performed against the Toronto Raptors. They tend to have pretty decent perimeter defense, although they were without Van Fleet today. Malachi Flynn kind of felt didn't do as good as a job as he normally does. He's not a great defender, but however, he normally plays a little better. He normally gives us trouble, especially in seems like especially in summer league, he gives our team a lot of trouble. However, we don't want to focus too much in this game. We really want to talk about the season as a whole. And so essentially, what I did was I basically took the stats for all the games for this whole season, and I wanted to calculate PIE and then the PIE with the defensive factor, so we can figure out which players on this team had the most impact on our team, had the most impact not just on winning, actually, yes, who had the most impact on winning, and so that's really one we want to get a really good look at, and it gives us an idea of who the team really needs to focus on in terms of being able to keeping on the team and also maybe shifting the focus on off of the offense to these individuals on the team. And so essentially that's what I have here on the screen. I have basically if you look here on the right hand side, 2021-2022 season, I have each player on the team. We have the PIE, and then I also have the PIE with a defensive factor. Uh, and so, and then I also have it ranked. I have this ranked by PIE with a defensive factor from the least to the greatest. And then what I did was I graphed it here, and so kind of so we can get a visual of what we're talking about over here. So basically, it gives us a visual of each individual player, what they bring to the table, what they gave to the New York Knicks this year. And so we're going to start with from the least to the most important or the most impactful players, and obviously it's a couple, the young guys are up there, Quentin Grimes and McBride. Quentin Grimes, I remember I did talk to a lot of guys as far as his effectiveness on the defensive end in terms of challenging shots, and he did struggle with that with I want to say the first half of the season, and he kind of started playing better as far as becoming more effective at challenging shots, especially after the All-Star break. But he wasn't able to finish out the season. He dealt with some injury issues, and so he was out of the lineup quite a bit second half of the season as well. Miles McBride, he gets a lot of garbage time, so a lot of these numbers are pretty crazy, especially for guards. So the numbers tend to be really skewed and really crazy, especially if you're getting if the coach brings you in to play like 50 seconds a game or even 1 minute a game, your numbers are going to just look absurd. It won't make any sense whatsoever. That's not enough time to get any rhythm, and so what ends up happening sometimes he gets really aggressive. He'll come in, he'll jack up a shot because he wants to, which I think is the right thing to do. He wants to get as comfortable as he can as garbage time anyway, and the crazy part is during garbage time, the coach only plays him like usually a minute and a half, 2 minutes at the most. But he comes in and he'll try to put up as much shots as he can, just so because he wants to get comfortable, right? And it makes sense. And also, he's trying to balance, doing what he's supposed to do on the offensive end, running the team, and then also making sure he gets comfortable with shooting the basketball. And so the next person, Kemba Walker. We're not really going to dwell too much on Kemba Walker. I'm sorry. Because, I don't think he's going to stay with the team, but we really struggled early in the year. Obviously, he was one of the guys that, one of the two guys that front office brought in that was supposed to help us take the next step. But, I'm not really sure what they were looking at. I think I made a video about that, talking about him and Evan Fournier. I'm not sure what, it was like, it seemed like the front office really paid a lot of attention to the team stats. So basically the defensive and the offensive rating per like that per 100 possession statistic, and a lot of people feel that's the best predictor of a team of a person's impact on the team. But sometimes it could, in my opinion, that could be misleading. And so I think that's what they were looking at. And so if you looked at those numbers for Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier, they were plus. I think they were plus on those numbers. They had a positive net margin, I think, last year when they were on the Boston Celtics. But then if you really start to break it down and look at their individual performances, you look at their field goal percentage, and then you look at what the opponents, the person they were guarding, how much, what that person shot against them, you quickly realize that those guys were actually, they were basically negative. The efficiency, the differential between near field goal percentage and what the opposing offensive player shot against them, they were essentially negative, and so they were actually a drag on the team while they were on the court. And so if you look at those individual numbers and compare it to the net rating number that they have, it should have told the front office that these guys are probably a drag on the Boston Celtics on that team's performance last year, and not actually net contributors to the team. But because they looked at the net rating alone, at least that's what I'm assuming they looked at. And, it just ended up being a disaster. As soon as they came on this team, you quickly realized, like, man, their defense is just atrocious with both of them. And then also Julius Randle did not play great defense. He didn't really make the same effort, put in the same effort that he did last year. And so that was also a big impact. But Kemba Walker, we don't want to get, like I said, don't want to get too much into it in terms of the PIE. In terms of these stats, because he didn't play, and he played enough, first half of the season to help tank our season, but mostly it's because of the defense. Because as you see here, although he missed a lot of games, his PIE was 5.10, so he contributed 5%. Essentially, the production, he was responsible for 5% of the team's production this year. But then when you start to factor in his defensive efforts, that's what this PIE with a decent defensive factor is here. Once you start to factor that in, that's when you quickly realize that he was actually a drag on the New York Knicks. And so Nerlens Noel was the next person we wanted to take a look at. And Nerlens, he was out quite a bit this year. And he was out a lot this year. And so I can't even remember how many games he played. I'm pretty sure. I think he played less than 20 games, and so we're not going to focus too much on him. Even when he was here, he struggled on the defensive end as well. So he signed a contract and basically just, and basically was injured, and so that was unfortunate for him and also for the New York Knicks. Jericho Sims, he's interesting player, big man. He made some improvements. However, he still struggles on the defensive end, in my opinion. As you see here, he was responsible for 2% of the production when you just look at the PIE. But then when you factor in his defensive effort, it actually dips by over 1 percentage point, by what is that, I want to say 1.36. So it dips quite a bit, and so he wasn't a drag on the team. However, it's his defense side. He did struggle, the team's defense especially struggled while he was on the court at times. He's good one-on-one defense, but team defense he really struggles. He gets lost at a lot of times, and he's really bad in pick-and-roll defense. And Taj Gibson, I skipped him here. 3%. He had 3%. His PIE was 3%, but when you factor in the defense, interestingly enough, it really dips once you factor in his defensive effort against his matchups. And so Cam Reddish is the next person here. If you see here, his PIE was 0.87, but then if you factor in his defense, it actually goes up. So it shows that he's a pretty good defender. He didn't play a ton of games for the Knicks, but you could tell when he was on the floor. I mean, he wasn't perfect on defense. He made mistakes, but you can tell his wingspan like allows him to make up for a lot, right? To make up for a lot of the mistakes. And he's actually he's someone that I'm very high on his team. And interestingly enough, given Thibodeau's approach to development, I'm really curious to see how they do with him this offseason, and to see what he comes back with next year. Hopefully, he's able to put in the work he needs to put in the offseason. He was injured, and he's been out for the whole season. But it's going to be interesting to see what they do. Evan Fournier is the next person. Responsible for about 9% of the team's production, but when you factor in the defensive effort, and which also includes his matchup, how well he performed on the defensive end against his matchup, dips all the way down to 1.73, so that's not very good. Alec Burks, same for him. He was at 11.5, but it dips down to 4.4 when you include the defensive performance against his matchup. Derrick Rose. Now this is where it starts to get, it gets a little better for the team slightly. Derrick Rose 4.7, and when you include his defensive efforts, 5.82. And it's kind of crazy. Derrick Rose is higher than Alec Burks of Evan Fournier because Derrick Rose I think played only like 25 games, possibly less. And so it's really interesting to see that. Emmanuel Quickly, he was 9%, 9.6%. Dips to 6.2% when you include his. He played good defense. Don't get me the issue with Emmanuel Quickly. He played good defense. It's really more about the efficiency because he was shooting only like 39% from the field this year. This year is high because he really stuffed. He's a pretty good rebounder. Gets a lot of assists. Gets some steals, and so. But this year is really a result of him. He's just not efficient enough. And so even though he played pretty good defense, if he gave up, he ended up probably giving up maybe 43% to shooting to the opponents. That's still higher than 38%, right? And so that's what's causing this dip when you include the PIE with a defensive factor. RJ Barry, same for him. Efficiency was an issue for him. And so he was shooting less than 41% from the field this year, and so that was a big problem for him. And so because of that, his defense did fall off towards the end of the year. First half of the year is pretty okay, but it falls off because the efficiency is just too low, and so he allowed higher. It's not very. If he allowed maybe 44% shooting, and so of course then that means this number is going to be lower, right? It's going to impact this number. Julius Randle's almost 17%, accounted for almost 17% of the production, but then when you include the defensive factor and his matchups, dips down to 13.5. Obi Toppin was only 8%, almost 8% when you just look at the PIE alone. But then if you include his performance against his matchups, this is the thing I talked about in the last video, he consistently outperforms his matchups, and so he more than doubles his impact when you factor in the defense on the opposing players, and you look at his efficiency versus the opposing players' efficiency. And then of course our top gun was Mitchell Robinson, although he accounts for his PIE is only 11%. Once you factor in the defensive factor and his matchups, it jumps all the way up to close to 40%. And a lot of this, it kind of tracks and make a lot of sense, right? Because if you go down here, obviously this is a graphical representation of that. Let's look at that first. And so as you see here, Mitchell Robinson, this is just how much, this is why, it's very important that they try to keep this guy. Um, the fact that he's puts pressure on the rim, he's a good finisher at the rim, obviously, right? And then he's a very good defender. So you have a guy who's shooting 76%, but then holds, the opposition down to about 43% shooting. Even if you're talking about even at the rim, like he holds oppositions down at the rim to like less than 50%. I think when maybe 46, 47%. I mean, that's just, that's really good. That's a very good player. That's a very high impact player. And he's the kind of player, he's like, in my opinion, he's a championship piece. And so that's why it's very important to to always try to keep these kinds of players if you can. Even if you overpay a little bit, you want to try to keep them and to help build this team going forward. The next person was Obi Toppin here. As you see, he was his PIE with defensive factor was at 18.3, and of course I think people are starting to see it. Now he started. He's very efficient. The problem with him is he's playing a power forward. He's an offensive threat at the power forward position, and as we all can see, he can actually average 20-10 on like 50+% shooting. Since he was inserted into the starting lineup, he's shooting like 56-60%, between 55 and 60%, somewhere in that range, since he's been inserted into the starting lineup. And so he's just a very efficient ball player, and so that's why this PIE with a defensive factor is so high, and because he just constantly outperforms his matchups. Next person was Julius Randle. Julius Randle is really the top dog on this team. But the problem with Julius Randle is his efficiency is just way too low. He's shooting 41% from the field, and then on top of that, he's allowing a higher percentage. His opponents shoot a higher percentage against him. So, efficiency-wise, he consistently loses the matchup against his matchups or against his opponents. Same thing for R.J. Barrett. Same struggle for him. Emmanuel Quickly, it was the same thing for him. Efficiency was a problem. Derrick Rose, that wasn't a problem, but his numbers are so low because he was injured, played only about 25 games. Alec Burks, same thing. Efficiency is just way too low. He does carry a load for us. Pretty high usage, ran the point guard for us, but the efficiency is just too low. Same thing for Evan Fournier. And so efficiency is too low for him as well, and they're just not very good defenders. And so if you look at the statistics, it backs it up, right? You look at if you want to judge this to see if this makes any sense, right? If Mitchell Robinson is really the most impactful player on the team, okay, I'm saying my PIE with a defensive factor says he's the most impactful player. Let's go down here and see what Mitchell Robinson is doing, right? If you see here, two top dogs is Julius Randle. We're looking at win shares and also PER. We're going to compare it to my numbers. And so win shares for Julius Randle 3.1. RJ Barrett is 2.3. Mitchell Robinson is 8.5. As a matter of fact, if you look at all these players I have down here, Alec Burks, he's at 6. Evan Fournier is at 3.6. Emmanuel Quickly is at 4.0. And Obi Toppin is at 3.6. And so as you see, Mitch Robinson is the highest on the team. The next highest is Alec Burks, right? And so the thing that makes it odd is Alec Burks is the next highest, but however, on the list, Alec Burks is, he's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He's ranked 7th behind when you look at PIE with a defensive factor. And so, it's just, I think the reason why that is, it's just he has a lot more minutes. I think that's the reason why he just has a higher win shares than, that's the reason why he has higher win share than Obi Toppin and Emmanuel Quickly, because his minutes, he gets three times the amount of minutes Obi Toppin gets, and he gets probably close to double the amount of minutes Emmanuel Quickly gets. And so that will make sense that he has higher win share than Emmanuel Quickly, and then Obi Toppin, because the win shares is a cumulative stat, right? So it's not like per game or per minute or anything like that. It's cumulative. Now, if you want to combine both of them, right, you want to look at the PER to see it's like a production per minute for the most part, right? And so that's also another way to gauge this to see whether my numbers make any sense or not. Let's get rid of this here. And so if you look at Mitchell Robinson, is number one according to my stats, but if we look at his PER is 20.8, he's by far the highest on the squad, right? Then the next person I said was Obi Toppin. I say he was the next highest person on the list. And if you look at the PER, Obi Toppin has the second highest PER on the team, right? So that makes sense. And then the next person is Julius Randle. I say he's the third highest according to my PIE with a defensive factor. And if you look at this list here, let's look at Julius Randle's PER. He's at 15.8, and that is the third highest on the team. So that so a lot of this is tracking, right? It's making sense. RJ Barrett was the next one, but RJ Barrett, his PER is only 13.7, so that is not higher than Alec Burks. Definitely not. It's definitely higher than Evan Fournier, and it's not even higher than Emmanuel Quickly, and so that's where it gets a little murky. But you guys kind of get the point. It's kind of tracking a little bit. So my numbers here, the point I'm trying to make is the numbers that I have here. It is meaningful. I'm just not, like I said, a lot of this stuff I'm not plucking it out of the sky. I've even showed you guys. I've tested the numbers where I've tested it versus like teams win percentage. Basically I was able to calculate these for the 30 teams in the league and compared it, and tested it versus the win percentage to see if there was, a meaningful relationship between both numbers to see if the numbers actually meant something. And the correlation was really high. I think it was like 0.93 or something like that. So these numbers are meaningful. And so that's why it makes sense when you kind of compare it. If you look at the rank that I have here and you compare it to these individual PERs, it makes sense, right? Like I said, Mitchell Robinson number one. I said he was number one. Obi Toppin was number two, and the PER according to Basketball Reference says he was number two. So it's lining up pretty well. Julius Randle number three, and PER for Julius Randle does show he's number three in terms of impact player on the team, right? And so that's, so that was pretty much what I wanted to talk about, as far as the numbers were concerned and as far as like the performance for each of these individual players. In terms of improvements for next year, starting with the front office, they just need to make the right moves. They need to make the right decisions. Last year, they really screwed up. I think I stated earlier that they brought in Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier, and they were supposed to, help the team take the next step. That was just a terrible move. I think that was probably the biggest reason. I would have to say it's not the biggest reason. I would have to say it's one of the bigger reasons we took a step back. It's really hard to gauge it. I haven't found a way to measure it, but it's hard to gauge it. But I do know they were, a drag on a team this year because they give up. They're less efficient than their opponents. They consistently lose matchups versus their opponents, and so so that was part of it. But the other reason too was, we did sign Julius Randle to that max deal, and he seemed friendly because I guess it would have been cheaper to sign him this year than next year. But Julius Randle took a huge step back, right? But in terms of, let's stay focused with the front office, right? They made mistakes this offseason. And honestly, Julius Randle signing was not the biggest mistake they made, but I felt like the biggest mistake that they made was Evan Fournier and Kemba Walker, and then also not bringing back Bullock, Reggie Bullock. Although as limited as the guy was, but he gives you versatility on the defensive end. And so I was pretty surprised when they let him go. And I really thought like maybe the smart thing to do was bring them back and then trade Burks. But of course, it's we just went in a different direction, and so that was just unfortunate. So the front office, they just have a lot of work to do in terms of decision making. They haven't shown that they know what the team needs to actually improve. In terms of drafting talent, they've done well drafting talent, like drafting, which is really good. But in terms of free agency moves, last year they did screw up. The first year they gave us Derrick Rose, and that was essentially we got Derrick Rose for Dennis Smith Jr. That was a great move. So first year they did great. Second year they just did terrible. The second year, so it's going to be interesting to see what they do this year. A lot of decisions need to be made, and hopefully they make the right decisions. Right? You have Obi Toppin trying to figure out can Obi Toppin and Julius Randle coexist. According to Tom Thibodeau, it doesn't sound like they can because Tom Thibodeau refuses to play them together. So it seems like the answer could be no. Then, if the answer is no, who do they keep and who goes, right? And the next decision they have to make is Mitchell Robinson, like I said. According to this, he's the best player on this team, you know. And it's crazy to say. People think, oh, he's extremely limited. But Mitchell Robinson, bar none, is the best player on the New York Knicks. The stats show it. Like, it doesn't matter how you measure it. He's just the best player on his team, and so the decision they need to make is whether or not to bring Mitchell Robinson back, right? Even if he goes, I mean, like, what can you really get back for him, right? This is the best player on your team, and you're gonna get him back for get what back? Like maybe a late first or some marginal basketball player, So that's gonna be really interesting. It feels like not even a no-brainer. They should try to do whatever they can to bring him back, because at this point you're better off just signing him, bringing him back, and maybe trading him. Like I said, he's the best player on your team, and you cannot let him walk for nothing, right? So that's all the decision they have to make. Of course, I think we talked about Obi Toppin and Julius Randle, if, whether they bring both back or trade one. And obviously, it seems like one of them have to be traded. The next person is, honestly, they need to make a decision on Cam Reddish. You brought this kid here and gave up first round for him. Actually, 2 first rounds. You gave a Kevin Knox, who was a first round lottery pick, and then a late first round pick, future first that you gave up for him. So you got to see what you have in this kid. And, that would mean that there's a couple of dominoes that will have to fall before you see anything from him. You're going to have to either get rid of Burks, either trade Burks or Evan Fournier. In my opinion, they should probably try to trade both of them. If they can try to get rid of both of them and get an expiring deal, especially for Evan Fournier, I think it can help them feel better about obviously going overpaying slightly for Mitchell Robinson. And but I think that's the only thing they'll have to do. So kind of they kill 2 birds with one stone with that. If they can get rid of Alec Burks and Evan Fournier, I think it solves the issue as far as money going forward for Mitch, and then it also solved the issue of where's the minutes for Cam Reddish going to come from. And so the next decision that they would have to make that I'm thinking about is whether or not to keep Nerlens Noel and Kemba Walker. It obviously didn't work out with both of these guys. Nerlens Noel was injured this year. Not sure what the front office wants to do with him. Do they think he's gonna be healthier next year and contribute, or do they want to wait until? Obviously, they'll probably have to wait to see what happens with Mitchell Robinson. Unless they're confident they can bring back Mitchell Robinson, then maybe they can move Evan on Nerlens Noel. And so, so that's where that stands. And Kemba Walker, I don't think he's coming back anyway. And so, that's kind of what's going on there. And then in terms of improved, so that's what needs to happen with the front office. They have a lot of decisions that need to be made to help improve this team going forward. With the coaching, coach has a lot of work to do. He needs to get an offensive coordinator that he's comfortable with. Front office bringing someone in obviously may not work because it doesn't seem like he actually talks to any of the assistant coaches that the front office brought in for him. So I think it needs to be somebody hopefully that he trusts. He needs to bring someone in that he trusts himself, and hopefully he listens to that person. Because on the offensive end, they're not very good. They're not very creative. They need a lot of work, and then also he needs to work on obviously, um, you know, not basically playing the talent that he had, playing, being able to see the talent and playing them right, not being too close-minded and being too stuck on whether or not the person knows all the plays and the person that he's going up against. Like Obi Toppin is a special player. He looks like this kid looks like he could be an all-star, and the coaches had this kid sitting on the bench like the whole year, like that the kid had this kid looking like he was a bum, right? If you saw Obi Toppin, seeing Obi Toppin playing early in this season, people were thinking he was a bum, that he needed like a point guard. He didn't have, strong enough game to stand on his own, and like he needed a point guard and all this other stuff. And but now you look at Obi, he doesn't look like that, right? So the coach really needs to work on that, being able to trust these younger players more, being able to trust the talent and putting them out there and trusting that they're actually going to do their homework and that they're going to learn and get up to speed. So that's the main thing he needs to do. He needs to work with Cam Reddish, to see and to improve his game quite a bit, because I think there's a special talent there, and it's about basically uh, put basically devoting time to this kid, so he can become a better player. The other person they need to work on is Miles McBride and Quentin Grimes. I felt like the maybe Quentin Grimes. I'm not sure. It might be a good idea to have both of them play summer league if both of them are healthy. Quentin Grimes, I think he's probably graduated from summer league or even like G League games, to tell you the truth, because he doesn't have any issues scoring there. I think with Quentin Grimes is really it was missed opportunity this year, because they really should have had him like just trucking up shots, trying to give him confidence, trying to fast track his development by making sure they ran plays for him, that he put up shots. I mean, there was like the one game I think he dropped like 27 points against the Bucks, but they needed more of that. They need to have this kid start chucking shots to get comfortable. Same thing like Obi. You got to run. You got to let these kids play, right? And give them the confidence that they need. And the coach needs to work on that. He needs to work on giving these kids the confidence they need and giving them the minutes that they need to actually become very good basketball players in this league. And Miles McBride, I think Miles McBride definitely needs to play in summer league this year. They need to basically put in the same time that they put in with Emmanuel quickly as a point guard into Miles McBride, to kind of get him up and going, to get him like more comfortable. He's graduated from the G League. I think he's graduated from the Summer League as well, but it doesn't hurt giving him extra practice. And with him as well, I think it's more time. With the NBA team, that's what needs to happen. And so in terms of coaching, that's what I feel like the coach needs to work on. In terms of players, X's and O's, I'm not really, X's and O's is going to be, all I have to say about that. Like I said, he just needs an offensive coordinator. They need more they just need a better offense. They need to put better plays on the offensive end, because what they're doing just doesn't really work it's not working very well. And it's just, it's on him to improve that offense. The other thing he needs to work on in terms of in terms of like leadership or management or people skills, he needs to work on actually all those things. He needs to work on communicating with the players, making sure the players have to know where they stand, right? If a player is not getting run or minutes, it's his responsibility to make sure the player understands why he's not getting minutes, right? And also, he needs to be, like I said, he needs to be able to inspire confidence. He needs to be a better leader, better communicator. So there's a lot of things that happened this year that just didn't look good at all. This whole year, I don't think I ever remember him trying to coach Obi Toppin up. It was just, he would maybe yell at him, and Obi Toppin would just kind of walk towards the end of the bench most of the year. But now Obi Toppin was getting minutes. I think a couple of days ago was the first time I ever saw him like talking to Obi, trying to coach him up. And that's like pretty pathetic, right? This is your first round pick from last year, and it's bad the way he treats players. It's like, if you're not contributing, if he doesn't see that you're able to contribute, to the game in his eyes. He doesn't even want to talk to you. He doesn't even want to waste time with you. You know, and people have kind of have dropped hints about him. How like when you worry is like when he doesn't talk to you because he's that kind of dude. Because he won't talk to you at all. He just won't play you, and he won't talk to you. And you're kind of sitting there wondering, what did I do wrong? What happened? Why isn't he playing me? Am I gonna play ever again? So he just needs to work on it overall. If he wants to do better, if he wants to help develop these kids a lot more. And so that's pretty much what he needs to work on. He also needs to work with, actually, the other player he needs to really work with is RJ Barrett. He really needs to work. He needs to work with RJ Barrett on his efficiency, and he also needs to make sure he sets a better standard on the offensive end. He needs to hold people accountable. If everyone is seeing Julius play the way he's playing, being inefficient, not hustling on defense, people are going to basically follow suit and do the same thing whenever they can, right? And so, in some ways, I think that's kind of rubbed off on RJ a little bit. When RJ basically started taking over as the man, you saw his defense just straight drop off. Occasionally, he will basically make the effort in a few of the games, or toward like in the fourth quarter, I would notice if the game is close, he will pick up his defensive effort. But throughout the whole game, is not there because he knows he's going to get like 38 to 40 minutes, and I think part of it is an issue with the coaching overplaying him too. But he sees the way Julius Randle does it, right? Julius Randle essentially doesn't always hustle, takes a lot of plays off on the defensive end, and then basically has really bad shot selection or is shooting poorly from the field. And so if you see your top gun shoots poorly from the field and it's like there's no accountability for that, you don't even bother trying to go away from him or trying to find ways to correct that. I mean, RJ Barrett basically ended up doing the same thing. I mean, like, he improved the finishing at the rim. At certain points this year, he had a nice little stretch where he was finishing at the rim much better. But then he dropped off again, right? And so he's been up and down with finishing at the rim or even just shooting, period. And so his efficiency needs to go up. He needs to be more around 44 to 45% for this team to win to be respectable and even like be over 500 next year. And even sniff the playoffs or even the playing game. If RJ Barrett comes back shooting 41% again or less than 41% like he shot this season, the Knicks are not going to be very good. They're just not. And so the only way they'll be good if RJ is shooting that low is if Obi Toppin becomes a more focal player on the offensive end. If they start focused on him more, and if they bring Mitchell Robinson back and they start to basically get him the ball more, then you might see the Knicks win a little more games. But if that doesn't happen, if Obi Toppin is not a more focal point, and RJ is shooting terribly, shooting like 40% from the field next year, they're not going to be very good. So those are the things that will have to happen for the team to improve, and for the coach to help the team improve as well. And so that's pretty much what the coach would have to do with the players and with himself to be better. In terms of individual players, all these players have a lot to work on, in my opinion. No one here is a good finished product. Obi Toppin is the one player that's, he's looking really good in my opinion. But he does need to work more on, finishing in traffic in the lane. I mean, he's the best on the team at it. However, I think he should just keep working on it just so he can be so the team can actually depend on him a lot more. Mitchell Robinson, I think he needs to work more on, like, he used to have really good touch around the basket. They need to work with him more on catching the ball and, and basically throwing in a hook or something like that, he definitely needs to work on that. Julius Randle, if he's still here next year, efficiency at all levels, making better decisions. RJ Barrett, he needs to work on efficiency and being a more complete player, even on our defensive end. IQ needs to work on efficiency as well. And, finding a way to try to move the ball a little more on the offensive end. I feel like he's a little too ball dominant, and so that's a big issue. Derrick Rose, basically health. If he's healthy, we're going to be great, and hopefully the coach doesn't play more than 25 minutes a game. Derrick Rose, if we're lucky, he would be averaging like 22 minutes a game next year, and that would be really good. And even like getting a couple of games off here and there. That's what I really think they need from him. Alec Burks, I really don't think he should be here next year. I think they should move him. I think they should move Evan Fournier. Cam Reddish, he has a lot of work to do. He has a lot of work, especially on the offensive end. Also on the defensive end, like I said, I think he could be a really special talent. Jericho Sims has a lot of work to do on the defensive end. His team defense is pretty bad. Pick and roll defense is really bad. And so he's got a lot of work to do there, right? And also working on his touch around the basket, being a better finisher. Taj Gibson, I wanted Taj Gibson back, but now I'm not even sure if they should bring Taj Gibson back, to tell you the truth. If they want to bring him back as a coach, great, but I don't know if they should even. I know they need like someone who's a leader, who sets a good example, a professional. Like you need like a big man. I think you need one at each position. I think you need like a veteran at each. I think you need a veteran wing, a veteran big man, and a veteran guard, in my opinion. However, I just don't know if Taj Gibson gives you. I'm not in the locker room, so I don't know this, but I don't know if he gives you enough of the leadership to kind of get the guys over to kind of. I don't know, to kind of basically hold guys accountable, right? It's like he's not top dog, obviously, but he's not the kind of person who's going to get into, his teammates' face really. And I think the team needs someone who's not afraid to speak up. Not necessarily saying getting all up into people's face. I don't know if Taj does that, but they need someone who's willing to basically hold all the other players accountable, including like a Julius Randle, especially Julius Randle. And I think it's better, is pretty good. It could be really good if you have it from a big man, but I don't think Taj really gives him that. So in my opinion, that's one of the reasons why I'm not sure if they should bring him back. When he does play, sometimes he contributes. He does contribute pretty well, but then other times he just looks outmatched, right? And so that's how I feel about that. Nerlens, he probably should get traded. Kemba Walker, I think he's going to be traded as well. Miles McBride, he needs to work on being able to penetrate. Just needs to work on his game all around. And so, trying to find a way to get more minutes on the squad on the NBA floor next year, not G League. I think he's already graduated G League. And Quentin Grimes next year, he needs to find a way. He needs to be more aggressive on the offensive end and start taking more shots and get more comfortable. They need to find a way to get him comfortable, because I think he could fill it up, and I think it's just about him being confident and comfortable taking all those shots. And so that's pretty much what I have from each of the players in terms of what they have to do to improve next year, right? And we also talked about what the coach needs to do to improve next year. We talked about what the front office need to do to improve the team next year. And then we talked about each individual player's impact on the season. Obviously, we had the scorer over here in the top right-hand corner. And then we had kind of like a graphical representation of the numbers over here. And so we had the graph here, and of course it shows us Mitch Robinson had the biggest impact on the team. Obi Toppin was number 2. As crazy as it sounds, and he got the least amount of minutes. But like I've explained before, a lot of this, the name of the game is efficiency. These two guys are the most efficient guys we have on the court. Derrick Rose was the other person, but Derrick Rose did not play a lot of minutes. If Derrick Rose was playing, he would be second place, and Obi Toppin would probably be third. But he wasn't. He didn't play. He only played like 25 games this year, and so it is what it is. So it sounds crazy, but these are basically the guys that had the biggest impact on the team this year. And like I said, if you compare my numbers or my ranking versus even the PER for these for the individual players, you realize, okay, I'm onto something. Like I said, Mitchell Robinson was first place in my book, and he's first place here. He's the highest PER here. Obi was number 2, and of course Obi's PER is number 2 if you compare it to everyone else. Julius was number 3, and you look at Julius' PER. Yep, he was number 3 versus everyone else here. So it's so that's pretty much what we did. Please like, subscribe, comment below. I'll be more than happy to respond to your comments. Thank you so much. Have a good night, guys.